Garden Path, where each week we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice while doing our best to help you seasonally manage your garden and landscape. I'm Joanne Shaw, owner of Down2Earth Landscape Design, and with me is my co-host and co-author, Matthew Dressing. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Joanne, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Matthew Drensing, owner of Natural Affinity Garden Design. As landscape designers and gardeners, we believe it's important and possible to have great gardens, which are sustainable and low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen.
That's right, and especially these days, right? Can you believe it's October?
No, what? Where are the other months?
I
You
don't know.
go back.
I don't know. Oh my gosh. And super, super dry. I've heard that the September has been, I know it's not over, quite over yet at the time of recording this. We've got a couple days left, but yeah, I mean, I think that they said the last time it was this dry was like 1930 or something. So yeah, so it's dry. So I hope everybody is watering their garden. I've moved my sprinkler as we speak during this show. So yeah, I think we have lots to talk about. I want to share a little bit about an upcoming episode because I just got back from the garden fling. I was telling you a little bit about it off the show, and but we more important for our listeners, we want to talk about October in the garden and what to do and what to not to do, right, Matt?
That's right. Yeah, that'll be exciting. A little clip about our the upcoming episode for sure. Lots of interesting and fun stuff there. And yeah, I just actually recently saw an article. I didn't get a chance to read it, but I guess there's something, a system just south of us holding all the September rains away.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's one of our things that one of our most important things that we always say on the show, and we say it in our book as well. Remember, is keep watering,
Hmm.
especially at this time of year. Again, we're just at the beginning. We're releasing it before October so that you have some timely advice. But as October cools off, and especially being in a drought now, those plants are still needing that water. So make sure you're watering all, especially new plantings or especially new evergreen plantings, down to the bottom of that hole you dug, and just deeply and thoroughly to keep them thriving for sure.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we have lots of tips to talk about.
That's right. And I can attest to the because the fling was in Philadelphia, and the 2 days of the fling, 2 of the 4 days of the fling, it was definitely raining. So
Well,
we not that as gardeners we didn't really complain at all. Well, maybe a little bit, but the wet feet is hard, right? But it was very wet. And yes, the system, like there was no wind. It was obvious that there was a system and it was just stuck. So
oh,
yeah, so definitely, and I kind of thought it would come up here, but no, it's like you said, it's kind of stuck in the south of us. So yeah, so Ontario is still dry, and
still
I don't
dry.
think there is any rain in the foreseeable future. So we don't know where you are, but if it is dry, then yes, please keep watering. And we're going to chat with you more about what to do in your October garden. A lot of this information is from our book. So shout out to our Down the Garden Path, a step-by-step guide to your Ontario garden that we is available on Amazon. And yeah, and all common sense tips that we like to share with you. Did you want to start with, well, the best place to start, I think, when you think of fall is bulbs, right? So our seeds and bulb section or discussion.
Yeah, exactly. And we've had a lot of past listeners write in to us by email or when we were on live on the show, just, can we plant bulbs now? And you know what? Now is the time to be buying them, and almost time to really plant them
Hmm.
as well. You can plant them now if you buy them and it's warm and you're in the mood for sure. But, we often have, squirrels and chipmunks who are looking and seeing that we're also digging, and they're wondering what we're burying. So they might go and dig some up. So there are
Hmm.
some bulbs like alliums and daffodils that don't want to or are really unappetizing to them. But now is the time, or October is the time to start planting. I like to wait until we get a few cooler nights,
Mm-hmm.
mid to late October. That way we have our little critters who are investigating. When they get really cool, they start to think more hibernating than food storage, and they've done a lot of food storage already. But yeah, so we're going to wait until mid to late October, or again anytime you really want to, but a little later in the season, to plant those bulbs to avoid them being snatched up by curious and hungry critters as well. If you haven't bought your bulbs yet, definitely head out to your garden centers. Lots of selection I've seen still around,
Mm-hmm.
in lots of different colors. But now is the time to start going out and planting those bulbs. Remember, the bulbs we plant now are going to be the spring's show.
That's right.
So think about your garden when you might need a little bit of color. Maybe you've got a very filled in, well planted garden and you just need a couple hits. When, or maybe you have a brand new garden and you're looking for something to fill in with
Mm-hmm.
some spring color, early spring or late winter color. Take a look at all the packages. It'll tell you, early spring, late spring, mid spring, early summer, when that hit of color is going to pop up at the right time. So definitely take a look at that. But there's lots of great selections and very interesting bulbs out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm all for one of, do their shopping now and wait and hold off till after Halloween for the planting.
Hmm.
I just think, like you said, the cooler temperatures after we've had some more rain and just so that especially if you're planting tulips, so that you're not battling with the squirrels. I know the popular ones, the popular bulbs or the more unique bulbs are the ones that go first. So if you're
Yeah.
wanting something different for your garden, then definitely start looking now, whether it's your garden centers, whether it's mail order. I know I want to shout out to Dahlia May Flower Farm in Trenton. She actually went to Holland last year, Matt, and she got to tour the gardens and from the growers, and she ordered really unique bulbs, and they're just arriving at her farm. And she does. So if you check out her website, uh, Dahlia May Flower Farm, I believe, and that will verify. You can. She's selling bulbs, and she's selling some really unique varieties. So yeah. So if you're looking for something different, whether it's for you, some people I think maybe people don't realize you can actually do it as a cutting garden. Let's say your vegetable garden. If you've cleaned out your vegetable garden, you can go ahead and fill that with bulbs now. And then in the spring, you have tulips that you can cut and bring into your house. And I may even do that this year. I don't know. Uh, and for my backyard, right? I can kind of fill that with bulbs. So yeah, so there's lots of things you can do, but definitely I know because I do always leave it late, and then my alliums, my big tall ones that I really like, are gone. So yeah,
Yeah, that's a great tip. Those veggie gardens, or those spots where you're going to plant something later in the season after the fall frost, may as well use them for something. They can provide that
yeah,
extra season of interest and loads of color. Yeah, that's very cool that she went to
Holland,
Holland
yeah,
and checked out all those bulbs. And yes, dahliamayflowerfarm.com, a
excellent.
beautiful website. My sister lives out that way.
Have
So
you
she goes,
visited yet?
I haven't visited yet, but she's been out so many times. Like, I see all the beautiful
Oh, yes, yeah,
cut
because they did a
stems and
lot of
jars.
cut your own flowers this year, which was really cool. So
Yes, and
yes,
that's what she was able to go and do. And I think she always has just those pre-made ones ready. And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, so
Oh,
yeah,
that's
so
great.
if you want to
Yeah.
visit them, check our show notes in the link. We'll have a link to them in the show notes for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And speaking of bulbs, we can't forget about garlic, right? And I know that's kind of like bulb. Is that bulb or is that a vegetable? But it is almost time. I think it's still the same thing. I think I would wait till mid to late October, depending on where you are, though. I think everybody knows their weather and when they want to plant. But garlic is unusual if you're not familiar in the sense that you do plant it in the fall and you harvest it in the summer and about July. I know I have tried unsuccessfully to plant it in my garden around my other plants. and has not done well. And I just figured I was doing something wrong, or not planting them deep enough, or using the wrong type of garlic bulbs. But I did learn this year that they really don't like competition. So
Yeah.
there's many other things that you can plant, other vegetables that you can plant in your perennial and shrub gardens. But unfortunately, garlic is not one of them. That they really like to be on their own, and so that's good. It was a learning experience, and I tried. So for our listeners, it's now you have an area, or if you've just cleaned out your tomatoes and your peppers and your cucumbers or whatever, then if you wanted to plant garlic, now is the time. Just know that you're not going to harvest them until July. So then you can't, I think sometimes people plant them in the fall in their veggie space, but realize then, where do I put my tomatoes and peppers, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's a good idea is, planting it somewhere else, like where your tomatoes were, your peppers were, or even rotating. If you have just some colorful annuals, you move around your garden every time, just for crop rotation, right? We don't want to have any insect pests build up from the repeated constant planting of the same thing in the same place, so you avoid disease issues, but you also help with the nutritional balance as well, right? So if you plant a tomato and it's constantly in the same spot, and you're not amending the soil for what the tomato's taking out, your garlic's going to eat differently than your
Mm,
tomato or your cauliflower or
right.
whatever. So yeah, great tip. Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And for those of you don't like planting bulbs, I was never a big fan of digging like little holes and stuff. One tip is, you're going to dig a big hole, a big flat hole, and put in a bunch of to really make an impact in your garden. Think of that you really want big groupings of bulbs in a hole, as opposed to plant one hole, one bulb, one hole, one bulb, and having these little soldiers in your garden. So that's one tip. And my other tip, and there's a picture of it in our book, is that I got an auger attachment to a drill. So I can just use, so even though I'm not digging one big hole, I can dig a lot of little holes in one area and then plant that way. So that's something to remember. And I do love alliums. I just think there are so many different sizes and varieties, and especially the late blooming ones that are coming up once the other leaves on your other shrubs and perennials are starting to show. I don't know. I guess I like tulips in my kitchen in a vase, but I don't have the energy to fight the squirrels outside. And I think the alliums put on such a great show.
That's right. The other thing, yeah, I love that because the auger. I also bought an auger last fall, because I had a new client who had a large space and they wanted fall bulbs. So I had a new drill, a new electric drill, or cordless drill, and a new auger, and it just works so beautifully
Hmm.
to get in there. Yes. So I found it was a little hard. There was one other spot I had to go back to, and it was a little cool, and it was starting to the ground was starting to freeze, but wasn't quite frozen, but was
Ooh.
cool enough that it kind of resisted just a little bit. But I'm talking like the first week in November and last year kind of thing. So,
Mm.
but yeah, no, they work beautifully as a thing. Yeah. So that's
Oh.
great. Watch out for cut daffodils in the spring as well. The stems release, and I think I'm going to say it right, but narcissisine, and I may have to look or confirm that one. But they emit an enzyme that kills the other flowers in your vase. So it
Oh.
goes in and it blocks their veins, and then it causes them to flop. So just solo daffodils. Daffodils go cut solo.
Oh, that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah. So bulbs, lots of time to go with bulbs. Again, get out there, look as soon as you can. If you haven't already, as the most popular or the fancy new ones go first. But you've got lots of time to get in some fall bulbs and some garlic in before next season for
Hmm.
sure. You also mentioned vegetables and
Yeah.
perennials and annuals. So, moving into some annuals and perennials, it is going to be time to start to remove some of those dead annuals as October marches forward, taking out anything that is cold damaged or very tender, our impatiens, our coleus, the very soft, fleshy materials, begonias, things like that. removing them. We don't want to leave them over winter. Those root balls just kind of take up space and they just get messy and mushy. So a good quick grab. If you want to bring any of them inside, begonias, especially different coleuses, lots of different annuals will work as well as a house plant. So just watching in October as you're thinking about removing annuals as cold approaches, we do want to bring those inside before they get too cold. So removing all of our annuals in a timely manner. And then perennials. Well, I guess if we're continuing with annuals, part of the other annuals we might have our tropical plants, right?
Mm-hmm.
Might have our like our dracaenas or fig trees or other
Fig trees, yeah.
tropicals that we put
Mm-hmm.
outside that we might want to start bringing in as well. I know here in Ontario we've had a few really cool nights where we were talking. I think last episode in What's Wrong with My Garden that we've had some really cool nights and we've seen some cold damage occur on some of our half hardy or not as tender annuals already, but it's starting to be the time to bring them in so they can acclimatize and continue to move through into the early winter unfazed and
Mm-hmm.
less shock with moving from somewhere that was really warm and then got really cold into somewhere that's kind of warm and dry again. So it's time to start to grab our tropicals and other annuals to bring them inside to prepare for the winter as well.
Hmm. And some can be like, I know I bring my fig trees into the garage. I don't bring them into the house.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's
Yeah, yeah.
something, yeah. So I do that. And my I've been able to, oh my goodness, the name's gonna go right out of my head. Oh, whirling butterflies, Gora. So I've been able to now this year they got eaten a bit by aphids. So they weren't, I didn't have a super successful year, but I have two pots of Gora. So it's borderline hardy annual perennial, depending on called whirling butterflies. And I think when I first started them in the pot, they were an annual, and climate change in the last 2 years, they're now perennials. Woohoo! But I brought them into my garage and let them go dormant and just leave them be, and they have regrown. And yeah, so if you want to experiment with other plants and do something like that, whether it's a cold cellar or an unheated shed or something like that, it's always worth a try. Plants are expensive, as we all know, and the cost of things. If there's no harm in trying, right?
That's right. And even if you don't have like a cold cellar or like a sunroom or something like that, if you do need to just put it in the garage, we want to make sure we put it at the front of the garage because the back of the garage gets the coldest. And that's where we have a deep freeze or just a little few extra degrees it drops that might damage that material.
Mm.
Keeping it at the front keeps the air circulation going. We get a little bit of added warmth from the winter sun that's warming around the door and as the air fluctuates and changes. But that's also a great spot. I think of often a lot of people like their purple fountain grass up here in the north, right?
Hmm.
The Centris cetaceum rubrum that doesn't overwinter for us, but just leaving it in a pot, keeping it just barely moist. You want to let it bone dry, but making sure they don't completely dry out or stay soggy, and just leaving them in the front of the garage. And they'll make it through. They'll make it through easily as they
And
go
that's good
dormant.
to know because that's where I kept my Gora. My Gora was actually the figs were kind of a bit more at the back of the garden, back of the garage, but the Gora was at the front. And yeah, so I think that that is interesting. Um, way to do it to really experiment with what you can do, and also a sweet potato vine. So I know that's also very
Hmm.
popular, like the purple fountain grass. You can actually dig up those tubers after the frost. They stay long, nice outside, quite long until we get a hard frost. And then
Hmm.
when you go to pull them out, you'll see that there are these sweet potato like tubers. You can bring those. Those should go in the house though, right, Matt? But kept cool.
I would keep those more in like a cool bottom of a closet or like a cold
Hmm.
cellar or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're great. They're not as tasty as the normal sweet potatoes, but they're still
Yeah.
edible if you want to try.
Yes, yes.
For sure.
But it's better. I think it's better to save them for tubers. And then I think it's in February that you start them. And we will probably talk about that in the February in the garden episode. And so, yeah, so you can, start your own um, slips I believe they're
Yep.
called, of sweet potato vine, and you may never have to buy it again. So that's good, and you can have enough that you may be able to gift to friends. So yeah, so that's something. So it is there's a lot of neat things that you can try to save and bring from one year to another. I think geraniums, perennial or annual geraniums, um,
Yeah, the
pelargoniums
pelargoniums.
are probably the most popular. I think there's, a lot of people that, their grandmothers brought them in and their mothers brought them in. Though they're famous for that, but there are other things too that you can give a shot.
Definitely, indeed. Well, if we're not bringing it in, we're leaving it outside.
That's
And so
right.
we have our herbaceous annuals and tropicals, but we also have our perennials that we would like to keep for next year and give them their best chance. Joanne and I are very much champions of just leaving it be. Just
Hmm.
let perennials do their thing. They're actually act as homes and overwintering sites for eggs and other insects that are going to come out in the spring, complete their life cycle, and help you keep biodiversity and an active, healthy garden over the next summer. So yes, the grass is kind of dry, funky, and you might have some flower heads, but just keep in mind they're feeding birds. They're acting as homes. They're overwintering sites. You've got native bees that might be burrowing into the ground. So leaving some leaf litter, leaving some perennials up is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a
Hmm.
very good thing, right? Mother
Hmm.
Nature's evolved that she doesn't run around every fall and hack everything down to 8 inches. That's not the way it
And
happens.
bag it up.
And bag it up and put it on the corner.
Yeah.
So we don't have to rush out there to do that.
Hmm. Certainly, if you've got, like we mentioned in our last episode, mildew on your peonies, I've got to get out there and deal with mine. I have been procrastinating. Or if you want to do some dividing, so now is also a good time to do some dividing. I kind of like doing that more in the fall because you remember what it is. In the spring, you're like, is this purple coneflower? Is this rudbeckia? Is this color iris or that color iris? Right. So I think your memory is still a little bit, remembering. And so now is a good time to divide anything that's looking like it needs to get divided. Hostas, ornamental, although ornamental grasses are tricky because they do look so nice being up in the winter. But if
Mm,
they are getting really big, both the hostas and ornamental grasses get that kind of empty space in the center. That's when they're really desperate to be split.
yeah.
So hosta is a good time to do now if you want to wait and enjoy the plumes and let the birds eat the seeds of the ornamental grasses and then divide those in the spring. That's fine because you know what it is, right? It's a little bit more obvious versus the perennials that die right down to the ground. So peonies also, if that's something, if you're going to move a peony, I'm going to relocate this one. That's why I haven't cut it back yet, is because it's like a reminder that I need to move it because it didn't bloom this year at all because it's not
Oh,
getting enough sun. My plane
yeah.
trees have just gotten too big. So I need to move it. So yeah, so if that's the case for you, peonies, prefer to be moved this time of year. And the other tidbit is to not plant too deep, you want to see the tuber, right? You want to see the crown of the tubers above the soil. So that's a peony transplanting tip.
Mm. Pardon me. And as you say that, yeah, irises especially like to sunbathe on the top. The other thing peonies like to do is when you do transplant them while you're putting them in there, they like loose, deep soil underneath them. So, plant them just as deep as they were before and a little higher if you need to expose the crown a little bit, but loosening that soil underneath those tubers, they get nice and deep and they like some nice loose soil
Oh, okay.
underneath them. 'Cause normally, like we say too, right, is just as deep as the pot, the plant is in the pot, twice as wide.
Hmm.
Don't dig too much deep underneath them because you don't want it to settle in when you first water it. But yeah, peonies love some foot space underneath them to
Oh,
grow
good to know.
into as
Like,
well.
do you think like use a fork, like one of the I don't think it's called a pitchfork, but like a fork?
Yeah, if you had like a garden fork and you were to
Yes.
just kind of loosen that soil underneath, you could do that without even having to dig it up, really. Dig
Okay.
just as deep as you need to and then break it up with a fork just in the bottom for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be
Okay.
a nice tip without having to excavate 2 feet or an
Yeah.
extra
Yeah.
foot, especially if you have a small garden or tough soil
Yes.
underneath further down, like we do.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
For sure. And then, yeah, I'd just love to echo the tip as well, like you had said, watch for diseased issues, right? Like your powdery mildew. If you do need to remove anything or cut anything back down, like your peonies, we're throwing all of that into the garbage, not our waste bags.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to go back into the recycling or into your compost pile. We don't want to give those spores or those diseases a spot to overwinter and then come back to your garden as well. So
Hmm.
yeah, excellent, excellent.
Mm. Okay.
What else?
Um, I was going to say that at the beginning of the month, if you're listening to this show at the beginning of October, sorry to interrupt you,
No,
um, take a few pictures. I know we joke about it
yes,
all the time, but this is a good time to see where, and I know my own garden is not looking like it normally does in the fall. It is looking sad because of how dry it is. And I was away and it didn't rain and I haven't been watering. And I've been watering the last couple of days, but it's going to take a bit longer for it to recover. So I definitely have taken some, pictures, and I have too many clumps of purple coneflower. I need to, thin them out and donate some and give some to friends. And
mm.
but then I have more space. Also, coming from being on a 4-day garden tour, I'm like, oh, I need to completely redesign my whole garden. But yeah, so I think it's a good idea because in the fall, like especially or after you plant your bulbs, take pictures. That's where the bulbs are going to come up in a couple weeks. So don't plant anything in the spring, or make sure it's watered. So we joke about our request for you guys to keep taking pictures, but we hope and we know, especially now that your camera's on your phone, it will help you, right?
Yes. Well, and as you say that, I have to go back into my photos for clients because
Hmm.
the one I mentioned earlier in the show, we have lots of bulbs, but we'd like to put some more bulbs in the back, but also in the front area where there's some space. But they've been dormant for 4 months, five
Yeah.
months now, right? So where are they? So I'm going back and I have to go into that journal for that
Yeah.
client and go, oh, okay. So I can't do that, but I can do there, and I can do there, and I can
Yes.
do
Yeah.
that
No,
border.
that's
So yeah, it's super helpful. It's super helpful, and I tell my students it's one of their projects in the fall class. It's year one. I get them to garden or journal a garden so that they can see, the evolution from one season, the summer season, into the fall and the winter. And they always say at the end, it's a big project, but at the end they're like, wow, that was really valuable. I see how that moves and grows now, and I see
hmm
how there's that space, and I would definitely do this differently. So it just kind of gives them a way, and it gives you a way too, the way to look at and think about your garden. Remember, it's a very four-dimensional dynamic living thing. So yes,
hmm
journal, journal, journal
Journal,
is
journal.
my
Photograph,
thing.
photograph, photograph. Right.
Yes, exactly.
And one of our Down the Garden Path episodes is never complete without the discussion about lawns.
Lawns, October lawns. Yeah,
October lawns.
we're definitely at the point in the lawn here. It's still very cool. October for most of North America, from what I'm seeing, especially up in our area, is going to be warmer than normal.
Hmm.
And that's year after year. We've talked about it on the show, is more normal than more normal
Yeah,
every
yeah.
year. So remember, grasses love, we grow, especially here in the north, those cooler season grasses. So if you're in a more northern climate, we're going to continue to top dress, water, and we can continue to seed our lawn as well because they love that 16 to 22. If we're getting
Okay.
regular, if you're, northern Manitoba or Winnipeg or somewhere where we're getting nights that are less than 10 degrees, we're hitting 6 and 7 regularly, you're probably just out of range, or your timing, sorry, for starting the seed is probably just gone. But right now, if you're in Southern Ontario or you're one of our lovely American listeners a little further south, you can still be doing grass
Hmm.
seeding. So grass seeding, staying it off for 28 days and keeping it evenly moist. It's a perfect time.
Okay.
Another popular lawn question is fertilizer. Can we be
Hmm.
feeding? As long as they're actively growing, you can be feeding it. At the end of October, beginning of November, so this is going to be a later October thing, but this is where we're going to put down our winter fertilizer.
Okay.
So it's going to start to break down and feed those roots. But as it comes through and starts to become active again in the cooler seasons of spring, what we're going to see is it's going to be too squishy. And we talk about this in, March, April, May in the garden. It might still be too squishy, and you don't want to compact the soil and damage that root zone. So remember, this is the feeding that you're going to do now that's going to be feeding in the spring when you can't be on your lawn.
Mm.
It's going to already be there and available for our grass and give it the best shot. The other thing we can do and put down too is mid to end of October, depending on your thing, is the corn gluten. Especially if you're here in Canada, because we don't have those broadleaf pesticides or
Mm-hmm.
herbicides that our American friends down to the south do. So putting on your corn gluten, it is actively cumulative at that point in the year. So October into November, and then again, the only time we ever would say you'd go on your lawn is to put down one more layer of early spring corn gluten. But once you put corn gluten down, you're not seeding anymore, anyways.
Right.
So, anyways, still can feed, still can
But I can
grass.
do corn gluten now.
You can do corn gluten now for sure. Yeah, if you're at the beginning of October listening to this again and you want to do corn gluten now, that's perfect. But remember, corn gluten lasts for up to 6 weeks and stops all seeds from growing. So it's grass
Mm-hmm.
seed, it's weed seeds, it's perennial seeds, everything.
Okay.
So you can do it, but you've
Yeah.
canceled another thing you could do. That's
Yeah.
all.
And the best way that it performs too that we've read that is multiple applications. So corn
Mm,
gluten isn't a one and done. It is a natural product, so it does take a few seasons to get it to really work on your lawn. So if you're going to apply it, go through the trouble of applying it this fall, then be prepared to apply it in the spring as well, at least. So
yeah.
spring, kind of fall, spring, fall type of thing to really see it work. I'm shocked at I resodded I don't you've been to my place now, Matt, and I don't have a huge lawn, and we resodded 2022, 2021, I would say. So this is our second year with this new lawn. And I have to say, it's just so still struggling. And I
Mm,
know, it was an unusual summer because it was wet at the very beginning. So none of the lawns really went dormant. I know the sod crews were not working very hard because nobody wanted to replace their lawns. But now in September, the lawn is dormant and not growing. So
yeah.
yeah, so I've tried to do some overseeding, but I'm really thinking about trying eco lawn. I know I've recommended to a lot of clients, and I'm thinking I'm going to buy a bag of that and reseed this fall and reseed in the spring, and really just see if I can. Again, I favor garden over lawn, but the lawn is there, and it is the front of your house, and even though it's a small area of my house, I still want it to look decent without a lot of care. So
Yeah.
yeah, so stay tuned for that, and we'll see. And I'll take some photos, and we'll see how that goes for me.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm really excited to see how it goes for you because I've recommended it to one of my clients, and they had a
Hmm.
shady front, and it's a fescue mix,
Yes.
and they had it underneath a maple tree, so it's a struggling, tough little area already. But we've had some really good success with it,
Oh,
even in the
good.
shade and the maple. I mean,
Yes.
it's the maple's so shallow rooted, right? She's gonna
Yeah.
always fight, but I mean, there's definitely like a visible improvement
Oh,
to
good.
the space. And then I think it's just I don't see them all the time. So I just every time I'm there, water,
Yeah.
water, keep
Yeah.
going. But yeah, it's definitely a good product. So I'm really excited to see how your
Yeah.
journey goes.
I think that's part of my issue is that my city trees have gotten much bigger than I expected, much faster. So am having a lot more shade on my lawn. And so I think that's part of it. And I know because they're native grasses, like native fescues, you don't need necessarily a lot of fertilizer. And
Hmm.
they also are much more deep rooted, so they'll hold on to water better. So I feel like as much as it's work for me to get out there and do it, and it is a little pricier. I think I don't know why I've hesitated. When I've got the bag, I'm like, oh, that's grass seed, that much for grass seed. But you know, time is money, and money is time, right? Sometimes. So yeah, so I'm gonna bite the bullet And I still would really love for her to come on the show to talk more about Ecolon. So we'll definitely maybe talk about that in the winter, and Miriam, and so that we can hit the ground running. But Ecolon, and the other cool thing is, not that it's an issue at my house that nobody cuts the grass, but you don't have to cut it because it doesn't go to seed. It just kind of drapes, so you can leave it a little bit longer. So if you've got a lot of property and you don't want to do a lot of maintenance in areas, then Ecolon could be a really great solution for you.
That's right. And what I'll do is I'll put the link as well in our show notes,
Oh, great.
so you can chase it down and take a look if you're
Yeah,
listening and wondering what it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's a great
So, yeah. So trees and shrubs, Matt, deciduous ones, there's not really much we have to do, right? We can just enjoy the color, the fall changes in our gardens.
Exactly. Enjoy the beautiful reds, oranges, and golds that we're starting to see. Like, obviously, less so if you're a little further south. But here in Ontario, she's turning well. The locusts are covering the lawn in those little
Mhm.
yellow golden bits, but a beautiful display so that we can just sit back and enjoy. But shrubs, yes, especially more so, I think, of like evergreen shrubs and
Mm,
trees.
mhm.
Going back to, again, we're in a drought, but making sure that we're watering those guys nice and deep so that they make it through the winter. Am I fast forwarding over deciduous for you?
You did.
Uh,
You went poof, right over
sorry,
deciduous.
whatever.
Well, I
Let
mean,
me go back to
again,
you.
no, no, no. I think, well, I think I want everybody to realize, much like you said with the perennials, like really the deciduous, I mean, leave your hydrangeas alone.
Yeah,
None of the
I see.
hydrangeas. There's so much debate in all the Facebook groups and online or whatever. None of the hydrangeas need to be cut. Enjoy the fall interest, the winter interest with snow on them and frost on them and dew on them. Nothing needs to be cut right now, so just enjoy it. We will tell you when you need to cut them.
Yes.
So yeah, so nothing, and again, nothing really needs to be cut back right now. It's going to lose their leaves as the leaves change, and then in the spring you can deal with the debris. But right now, enjoy the fall, enjoy the fact that it's gonna fall, and the leaves are gonna fall and the flower buds are gonna fall, and insulate your garden,
Hmm.
and kind of start to decompose with the mulch. Lots of hiding places for beneficial insects. There's really not too much. If there's something that's blocking your walkway or something like that, and you need to trim it to get it out of your way, or you're having to duck under something, yes, I understand that. But for the most part, there's really nothing you need to do. I think of the highest maintenance quote unquote shrub slash deciduous tree slash shrub would be just say a Japanese maple. You do need to make
Yeah.
sure they get more, just with how delicate their leaves are and how sensitive they are to wind, especially winter wind. They do need, and they tend to be naturally grown as an understory tree, and we don't grow them that way here. They're way out in the middle of the lawn or right by the front concrete door and brick house. So they do need extra water. So now is the time to start, once a week, put your hose on, drizzle a drip, and really water those Japanese maples deeply. And we'll talk about winter protection for them in our November episode. So if they're newly planted, then they need a little bit of extra, protection. But I would say for October, they just need some extra water. Wouldn't you agree, Matt?
Yeah, yeah, just making sure they're watered nice and deeply, because they are that wind sensitive, like you said. They have very thin bark, and they'll desiccate fairly easily. So definitely, yeah, that's a great tip for sure.
Mhm.
One that I just plowed over to get to evergreens.
Yeah, no problem. And other people, they think the only other thing I can think of in your, I guess, garden overall would be compost. So if you're not happy with
Mm,
your soil, if you're thinking it like me, things are drying out a little too quickly, then maybe you do need to overdress,
top
top
dress or
dress
overdress, yeah.
overdress with some compost or manure. And I think you can do it again in the spring, or you can do it in the spring or the fall. But I kind of feel like we have more time. It seems like fall is longer and the days aren't as spring comes and there's so much to do. So I feel
Yes.
like if you've got the time and you see the bags of manure on sale at the grocery store, mushroom compost, some of the better stuff is you get what you pay for, people. So, and even though it's on sale, if you want to get the high end, the seafood, or not seafood, sea
Yeah, the sea compost, like yeah.
sea
Yeah.
compost, yes, or the mushroom compost, things like that.
Worm
Uh,
castings.
Worm castings. There's lots of natural things that you can do to improve your soil that will hit the ground, that's going to work all winter. And then you hit the ground running in spring. So yeah, so now tends to be a time where I know I have, the design season's a little bitty slower, and I can spend some more time on that, because it's just, and you never know the weather in the spring either, right?
Yeah,
So
I know, true. And you have all this extra time where those organics get to leach their nutrients into the
yeah.
soil so that the plants can eat them, and you get that bioactivity rejuvenating as well, depending on what
Hmm.
compost you
Hmm.
end up getting. But yeah,
Hmm.
yep, for
That's
sure.
right.
A
So
great time.
our evergreens, Matt.
Oh, I want to talk about evergreens now. Let's talk about that. No, you know what? It's just being out of the clients this week's again, just this the watering with our evergreens and our newly planted evergreens. One of my clients, we put in a beautiful couple of boxwood spirals, and you know what? We just want to make sure that they're well watered, much like your Japanese maple, right to the bottom of that hole, just once a week until the ground freezes solid. Evergreens are meant to be evergreen and enjoyed
Hmm.
throughout the season. So, making sure that they're well watered will help protect them through going through the winter. And again, that's why we've really invented the burlap and the screens and stuff like that, but as well as to protect things like our Japanese maples that are,
Hmm.
we've removed their natural protection. Like you said, as an understory tree, the
Right.
surrounding trees were their burlap or their protection. So yeah, just making sure that they're fortified. And I always love using the wilt proof as
Oh,
well.
okay. Oh, on your
Yeah.
Japanese maples. Oh, no,
Well,
on
you
the
could
evergreens.
more so on the evergreens, but you could
Okay.
use it on your Japanese maples as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're great for your evergreens. And you can use wilt proof as I don't know if you know this, but you can use it through your perennial material too. So in the spring and the summer while you're planting new stuff, you can use your wilt proof on it and
Oh, what
help
does it
as like
do?
an it's an anti-desiccant, so it helps block some of the stomatas on the leaves so that the water doesn't get pulled out on
Oh, okay.
low humidity or windy, sunny days. Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
wilt-proof. I like wilt-proof for
Yeah.
our fall protection, but we'll get more into that. Like you said, as we get into November in the
That's
garden,
right.
we start to put things to sleep for good.
That's right. I do want to mention this is something I've talked to a few of the clients that I visited over the last few weeks, is the one section in our book, in October, is lasagna gardening. And it's a kind of a photo array of what I did in my own garden. And so anybody who's, I've gotten a few clients who are looking at doing a garden or converting their lawns into gardens, and, looking for a plan, but doing the work, wanting to do the work themselves. So I've explained that, fall is a perfect time that you can go out, or even just killing their lawn and putting down mulch in a pathway, something like that. So you can Google it. You can check it out. We've done a past episode about lasagna gardening, but it simply is covering that area, with uh, cardboard, overlapping the cardboard, removing the packing tape, and then covering that, wetting it down, giving, so it doesn't blow around, or holding it down with some large rocks, which is what I had to do. And then covering it with a good, I just did mulch. I would say if you can do compost and then mulch, that would be better in the long run. Good 4 or 5 inches, so thicker than you normally would. And literally in June next year, so then that's all you need to do. Get it wet. It's going to be fine for our fall rains and winter snow and all of that stuff. And then come spring, probably by May, June, the cardboard will have decomposed and you can start planting, or you can, level it to put your stepping stones and pathway and that kind of thing. So Yeah, so again, if you've got our book, you can check it out, page 94, or you can listen to past episodes, or you can just email more or Google more about lasagna gardening.
I think we're going to do a little bit of that at the college as well with some of the
Oh,
students
good.
to kind of change one of the areas
Yes.
around and just kind of go through that. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful way of hitting that reset button or building something or growing something new.
For
So
sure.
yeah,
Or even your boulevard. Like if you're worried about what your
yeah,
neighbors are
yeah.
going to say about you touching your boulevard, well, you can just quietly just cover it with mulch and then next year just start slowly planting things and it can be like a real subtle transformation to getting rid of the grass on your boulevard because we all hate mowing that, don't we?
The roughest grass to cut
That's
never
right.
looks good, does
That's
it?
right. Oh, goodness gracious. So yeah. So did you want to talk about our design favorites as we wrap up the show?
I was gonna say, yeah, I think we can. We're pretty much have given you all the tips for all the different aspects or areas of your yard, but we always have this one little section for each month. If you're wondering what you could plant or looking for
Hmm.
some inspiration, we have our design favorites. Mine is our strong box holly. It's a North American native broadleaf evergreen. Makes a good substitute for boxwood, so it has a little bit of a longer leaf, a little bit more elliptical than it is kind of rounded than
Yeah.
boxwood, but it has a very similar look, and it's evergreen as well, and it doesn't have as many disease issues as like our boxwoods do.
Hmm.
So all those things we talked about with what's wrong in our garden, the moths and the blight, etc. So it's a good substitute. So if you were looking for something to replace a damaged or hurt boxwood, you might do that as well. So
Perfect.
that one's my favorite. And you don't have to worry, even though it is a holly, you don't have to worry about the berries unless you get gem box, which is the female. So remember, hollies need that female, that male, so they're
Oh, okay.
dioecious. Yeah, so yeah, as long as you plant the boys, you don't have to worry about berries or anything else.
But what's wrong with the planting the girls and having berries? Anything?
Nothing at all.
Oh, okay.
I personally prefer it. If I were to plant holly in my own garden and I don't have a big enough space for them, I would be all the girls would be front and center and just
Oh,
covered
okay.
with berries. I love winter berries in the garden. I think they just add such depth and biodiversity and winter interest. I love them.
Yeah. Oh,
But
good.
yeah, so nothing wrong with those beautiful girls.
And
Um,
my suggestion is oak leaf hydrangea. So it
mm,
really will start to come to its own in October, not necessarily with the flower, but with the foliage. So they are unique in the sense that they are very oak leaf like, much bigger oak leaf shape than on oak trees, but they've got a really interesting leaf shape. And at this time of year, they start to go burgundy and they are a showstopper. So it's great because they bloom early in the season. They have been a magnificent pollinator. I did not realize how good of a pollinator they were as far as a hydrangea goes. I had flies, and you were even over that day, remember? And when we were recording, and you were like, "Oh my gosh, look at all the different kinds of insects." So
yeah,
it's definitely been buzzing all summer and now it's about to start turning red. So I'm really excited. They do have it in different hybrids, but you can, depending on the size. So I just say go with the bigger one that, makes a big statement in your garden. But I know there are some dwarf varieties as well.
yeah, I think of peewee, the cultivar peewee,
Mhm.
and it's only 3 feet by 3 feet. So,
Yeah,
and it gives a beautiful, like a little bit more of a purplish with its red as well. So, like a rose or a purple red in
yeah.
the fall. So, yeah,
Because
yeah.
it is a native, is it
I
not?
was also going to say that too. It is also a North American native hydrangea. So, it is native to the continent, much like our Annabelle hydrangea.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh, that's
So,
great. So yeah, so I think this was a great show. We hope we gave you lots of tips. I'm really excited. I've just gotten back from Philadelphia from the garden fling. So 4 days of seeing, I think we said 15 gardens, but a couple of them were like big public gardens, and one was an arboretum, some really interesting private gardens. And I said to Matt, I'm not ready. I haven't digested it yet. So I want to come up with a plan to be able to share that with you. So yeah, I did not realize that Philadelphia was the garden capital of the US with 38 public gardens. And I was overjoyed by seeing what we saw despite the rain. So I'm excited to share that with you in an upcoming episode.
That's right. So stay tuned for that.
And you can follow us on social media for I will be posting some posting and stuff as well.
Yes, I was thinking that as you were saying that. Yeah, definitely check out all of our social media. So at Down the Garden Path podcast, and because I'm sure you've got lots of wonderful pictures of plants and other beautiful gardens. So join us on our Facebook group. Down the Garden Path podcast is our handle there on all the major platforms. So thanks again for joining us here on this episode of Down the Garden Path. I'm Matthew Dressing here with my co-host and co-author, Joanne Shaw. Joanne and I enjoy hosting Down the Garden Path, bringing you interesting and relevant topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you from our research and from the wonderful guests that join us here on the show.
That's right. So don't forget, you can spend time with us on Down the Garden Path. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Down the Garden Path Podcast. You can also find us on your favorite podcast provider. And while you're there, please hit subscribe to be notified of new content. And we really appreciate it if you can like or share or leave us a comment. That really helps us get the word out about our show. We love hearing from our listeners. You can always write us at Down the Garden Path Podcast at hotmail.com or via our websites. You can find me at down2earth.ca, that's with the number 2, and you can find Matt at naturalaffinity.ca. Thanks for joining us down the garden path.